Hey guys, I'm going to be going over some of the newer JavaScript features. A lot of these are ES6, and it'll be really helpful for you if you're trying to get into React, Vue, or Angular. Pretty much any of the front-end frameworks, you'll see code like this. Now, this isn't meant to be a comprehensive guide, but more what I use the most when I'm coding React, and what I think is most important and you'll use the most yourself. Now, to help me out with this, I'm using a plugin called Quokka, and what that does is just evaluates my JavaScript code as I write it. So you're going to see throughout this, off to the right is going to be like a little blue thing, and that's going to be basically the evaluated JavaScript code. But we'll get more to that in a second, and so if you want to follow along, you can download this plugin. But let's get started with this. So first off, variables are a little bit different. So if you've done vanilla JavaScript, it looks like this. You use var, you pay the name of your variable, and now there is constant let. And I actually don't use var at all. I only use constant let. So what are the differences? Well, with const you can't reassign. So Joe, I can't set him to 9, for example. It's going to tell me an error, assignment to constant variable doesn't let me. But with let I can. So Tom is equal to 9, and now I can see Tom and the value. We need to get rid of Joe since Joe doesn't work. Now you can see the value of Tom is 9. And so when would you use const versus let? Well, if you need to reassign it, use let. Most of the time how I do it, this is a little controversial statement. I use const for all my variables, and then whenever I basically get an error or I need to reassign, I'll then use let. I never use var anymore at all, and I would recommend not using it. Okay, next up is functions. So functions used to look something like this. This is me assigning a function to the variable add, and so you use the function keyword, here are your parameters, and then you curly braces, and then you return. So this is an add function, adds the first two parameters a and b, and so we're taking 1 and 2, adding, and we get 3, right? Makes sense, looks cool. So now there's a new syntax you can use with it. It's called an arrow function. So you'll notice it's very similar to what's up here. New add works exactly the same way. We can also console.log the addition of new add, and we will get 3 just like we did up here. So the difference is, instead of saying the word function, we put our parameter list first, and then we do an arrow and then curly braces. Now there's a little thing you can do extra. So notice how we don't have other stuff here. Like maybe I'm going to say const c is equal to a plus b, and then I return c. Or I do some other stuff, right? You can have more stuff here. That's fine if you're using curly braces, but right now, since we're only doing one line, right? We only have a plus b here. There's actually a shortcut you can do where you just say, you get rid of the curly braces in the return statement, and you just return that right away. So this is what it looks like. Here's new add 2, and we can console log that, show you guys it's the exact same. So you get 3, and so we just pass in our parameter list, our arrow. So instead of wrapping this with curly braces return like this, right, we can just eliminate those, and it's assumed whatever the value of this is going to be returned from this function. Now this is really nice and is good for shorthand functions that are inline and you want to pass to other functions, which I'll talk about in a second. And so to differentiate between these two, I use this whenever I can, but if I need to do more than a one-liner function, then I use curly braces and I can put more stuff before I return. Also, here's another shorthand. If you only have one parameter, you do not have to put curly braces. Or not curly, parentheses I mean. So I can put them if I want to, right? I can say x is equal to x plus 5, or I can just remove them and just have x. So this function takes one parameter and adds 5 to it. So that's optional, put curly braces around it. So here is an example where you use functions like this. It's really handy. All of these above, I was assigning functions to a variable, but you can also just use them to pass to other functions. So for example, I have nums here, which is an array of 1, 2, 3, and then here I map through the array. And then for each element, I pass in, I apply this function. So this function takes one parameter, and it says x plus 5. So here we are just adding 8, sorry, not plus 5, plus 8. So we're adding 8 to each number, and we get 9, 10, 11 from adding this. So this is much better to when, you might be like map, and then you actually type function in here, AB. I guess you don't do AB, you just have X, right? So here's the equivalent, like that. So you type the function inside of here, and oops, you don't do arrow functions. And we can console log that, and you get the same value. So these two are equivalent, right? But instead of using the word function, we can shorthand arrow, which is really nice. I love that. All right, and actually we can keep that. We don't need to delete it. All right, next is default values in functions. So now you can have, right, look, we have this equal 5 thing. So before I just had X by itself, but now you can have a default value. So here I called multi without a value. So see how it defaulted to 5 here. So 5 times 2 is 10. So when I called multi with no parameters, I got 10. Now I can also call it, passing in a 5, I get the same thing. Or I can call multi and actually pass in a 4, and now it's equal to 8. And now this is not restricted to just one parameter, right? I could have y as another parameter, and this could be equal to 10, right? I could set a default value there, and I could just add y. So all of these did not have y, right, as a second parameter, so it defaulted to 10. You can also don't have to default it, right? I can only have a default for x, and now these are all not numbers because y was undefined. So you can have defaults in your functions now. Very nice and handy. Next is the spread operator. This is a new thing in JavaScript, actually a notation thingy. So I can do ... places, and it does different things. The first thing is in a function. So here's another function, and I did ... a. And maybe a better way to say this is ... args. So what this does is it grabs all the arguments and it's put it into an array. So notice how usually when you call join, if you know what join does, why don't we actually just console.log what join does real quick. So if I have 1, 2, 3, and I call join on it, and I add a space, what it will do is it will just concatenate this list into a string, and it'll put spaces in between. So 1, 2, 3. So my join me function here, I'm passing it, so here's me calling it. I'm actually calling it with arguments, right? So the first argument is 1, 2, and 3. I'm not passing it in an array. But because I use this dot syntax here, what the dot syntax does is it puts it into an array for me. So I can grab all the arguments and this basically passed to my function, and it's given to me in an array. So that's why join me, instead of passing an array like this, right? I just can pass them in like this. And then it'll have it as an array, and I'm joining it. Now, this grabs all the remaining arguments. So I can have an argument out in front, like first. And so now, see how it's just 2 and hey? Because the first is now equal to 1. So I could say first, and I could add a space, or maybe I want to put a dash. So see how first is back and it's 1 dash. So I can also, do this as many times as I want. So here's second. So now I got rid of 2. 2 is being stored in this parameter, and I'm not using this parameter anywhere. So that's ... in functions. Next over here we have, you can actually use it when calling a function. So here is a sub function, and I just want to subtract a and b, and here's an array 5 and 3. So I want to subtract 5 and 3. So one way to do it is I can grab the first value and the second value, right, and pass it into sub, and it'll subtract them. But I can also basically expand the array. So here we have the array 5, 3. So when I do array, or ... array, into calling the function sub, it takes these and just, this is going to be the first argument, this is going to be the second argument passed to the function. So if you were to unravel this, it's like I did 5, 3, right, with this ... It's like I took the array value 0 and array value 1, and see how they're both getting 2. So that's when you have an array and you want to pass each value in as parameters, not the array as a whole, if that makes sense. Next area you can use this spread operator is when you want to basically create new arrays. So here's a new array here. So I have 9 comma dot 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 array. And what this does, you can see the value of new array, and this might make sense. So now the new value is 9 comma 5 comma 3. So it took all the values that was in our original array and basically just put it here. So we have 9 comma 3. Now I'm not restricted. I can do this as many times as I want. So I could do dot 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 array again. And now notice how 5 3 5 3, we have it twice. And I can also put it in front, dot 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 array. And now I have a 5 3 in front. So all that's doing is it's taking the value of this array, which we know is 5 comma 3, and putting it in here. And this is really handy for creating new arrays. I guess we'll keep that. Okay, next thing is with objects. So here I have a color map. Blue maps to red, pink maps to yellow, and I can create a new object. So here's me just creating a brand new object that's the exact same, right? Blues to red, pinks to yellow. So these are equivalent right now, and you could do the same thing with arrays, right? So I could say const new array 2 is equal to dot dot array, and it's basically just creating a new copy of array. It has all the same values in it, 5 comma 3. So I'm doing the same thing with this object here. And the reason why you might do this is you want to keep all the same values that are up here and add another. So like I might want to say black maps to light blue. And now I have black, blue, pink, yellow, right? I have all my mappings plus this extra one. So there's some special things with this too. So what happens if, say, I add blue here, right? And I already have blue up here. So let's say blue I actually wanted to map it to, I don't know, white. Notice how nothing happened. Blue still goes to red. The reason for that is this overwrites the blue up here. So that's very important. And you can also do this multiple times as well. So I could have dot 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 color map, and now I am spreading it twice, but nothing will happen, right? Because they overwrite each other. But what I can do is I can move blue below color map. And when I move blue below color map, I can now overwrite whatever is in color map up here. So you can think of just this dumps the values of whatever is in the actual object. So here, that's how you would overwrite a value with the dot 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 spread. So we have blue is now equal to white. So that's pretty cool, and I use this a ton. I really like the spread operator, and I'll use it with arrays and objects all the time. Objects use it the most, and important with this overwriting thing. Make sure you know when stuff is getting overridden and when stuff isn't. Okay, next thing is string templates. These are nice as well. So normally you might concatenate a string like this. So we have first name, last name, and if I want name together, I'll do first name space last name like this, and I'll just do plus signs in between, and we get Bob space cool. Now the new way to do this is with backticks. So I can say const new name, and in here I have my string template is going to be backticks. So up here I didn't do backticks, right? I have just quotations and stuff, but I can have backtick, and here I can put string stuff. So I am a string. So anything I type there, it just renders it as a string here. But notice how I put $ curly braces, and I can evaluate JavaScript variables. So that's how I just add a space. These are equivalent statements up here. And I can do other things in here like 5 plus 7. So 12 space cool is now equal to what new name is. I can keep it to first name if I want to, and I can put a dash in between. So it's how you create new strings and pass in JavaScript variables and stuff. Alright, next is creating new objects. So this is how you would create new objects that have the same property name. So you would say first name, so this is your key and your value is first name, right? So Bob. So now we see first name's Bob, last name's cool. But this is, it's annoying to have to write the same thing twice. So there's a shortcut now. You just have to type first name, and you notice how we don't specify the key and the value, we just have one thing. So when there's one thing, it interprets the name of this thing as the key, and then whatever the value is, it grabs from the variable. So see how these are equivalent statements, right? So first name is equal to the first name variable. It grabs it and does it automatically. It's very nice. So a little bit of a shorthand. The next thing is, what if I want the actual string, right? So here the key is called first name. But what if I don't want the key to be first name? What if I want the key to be Bob? Well, here's an example of that. You have to use brackets around it. So first name, I am a first name, right? We have that. Key is first name, values, I am a first name. That makes sense. And then here I did brackets, which gets the value of first name, which is Bob. So that's why the key is Bob, and we see I am Bob there. So this grabs the actual value of first name versus just calling it first name here. And you can also, right, we can see you can mix these things. Now, okay, well, I'm mixing it, but notice how this is getting overwritten again. So if we put it below, we see first name and we get Bob there. Okay, and I'll get rid of that. Next is functions. So functions inside of objects. There's a couple ways you can do this. I tend to do it mostly like this, but you don't have to. So here, this is kind of how I was doing it inside of the map. So this is our shorthand arrow functions. So the property A is equal to that, but you can also do a function like this. And these guys are equivalent. Now notice you can't really shorthand the return statement here, so that's why you see curly braces, return. But notice how I didn't have to do a, right? So this is shorthand for that. So instead of typing colon function, I don't have to do that. I can just say B, and here's me calling the functions. They both give me an 8. Alright, but most of the time I end up just using this because it ends up being shorter most of the time, right? This is shorter than this. So I'll usually just use arrow functions because those are my favorite. Alright, destructuring. This is really sweet. This is one of my favorite things about functional programming languages, and I'm glad they started adding some support in JavaScript. So here I just have an array called alpha that we can run stuff on, and this is me getting the first and second value of alpha. So look at me console logging first and second. It's equal to A and B. So this is kind of weird, right? So I'm currently destructuring an array. So when destructuring an array, you put brackets around like this, and then you can grab values like this. So this is the first value, second value, could get the third, could get the fourth. And so this variable name is now I can use. And the other thing I can do is the spread operator in here. So I can say ... other, or rest, for example. So what is rest equal to? Check out that. That rest is now an array, and it has all the other values. So it's like I popped A off, put it inside of this variable called first, and then I just grabbed the rest of this, bundled it into an array, and I put it into rest. So that's what the spread operator does in conjunction with this, which is really cool. And I'm not limited to this. I can do second, third, right? And notice how I'm popping each value off, and I can get second here is now equal to B, and my third, of course, it's going to be C. So that's how you destructure an array. And you're not limited to destructuring just arrays. You can also do objects, which is really fun. So here's an object that I made, a little person dude, age, height, weight. So let's say I want to get the age of someone, and I want to store that in a variable. So I might say const age is equal to object.age. So instead of typing this, because it's redundant, see how I say age here and age here, I can do it like this. And the reason I have that commented out is because notice how I have age here and age here, name conflict, so I'm going to comment this kid out. Okay, so const age. So how does it know what is this doing? So notice how my age is 5 here. So what this does is I want to destructure an object. When destructuring an object, I have to use curly braces like so, and I'm grabbing the age value out of this object. Now I'm not limited to just grabbing one value. I can also get height, for example. So height is 60. I could also get weight here. So weight. And now the name needs to match what we have up here. And I can also say dot dot, other, for example, or what whatever you want to call it. And what other is going to be is all the other properties that we didn't choose. So this is me grabbing age out. So it, just like with an array, it's like I pop the age out of this object, and what others left is height and weight. And now I can do stuff with the rest of that object if I want to. And again, you can grab the weight out of here. So if I grab the weight, now only height is left. And if I grab all the properties out, other is just going to be an empty object and there's going to be nothing left. But this is really cool and I use this a lot. Now, you just saw me have to comment these out. So sometimes there's going to be naming conflicts when grabbing the name out of this object. So you can rename it with a colon. So this is me renaming age to bacon. So I'm getting the age property out of object and then renaming it to bacon, and then bacon is equal to 5, which is our thing. And again, you can do this as many times as you want. So height, and maybe I want to call this I don't know, ASDF, and we can render ASDF there. And height, I misspelled it, ASDF, there we go. So that's 60. So we're grabbing the height out of the object, and let's just get rid of that. So you can do that as many times as you want. And here is me setting default values. So like functions, when we can set default values, you can also set default values for objects. So I don't have a yogurt property in my object, and here is me trying to destructure yogurt out of object. And here I set a default value of blueberry. Now if I were to get rid of that, and so here's the value of yogurt, it is equal to blueberry. If I were to get rid of this equal sign, you'll see it's now undefined because it's not inside of our object. So I can mix and match this. So I can grab the age maybe from this guy, and I can rename that to bacon2. And cool thing to note, you can also rename. So let's show you guys that. I can rename this to just y. So y is going to be undefined, right? But I can also set a default value. So I can rename and put a default value. So y is now equal to 5, which is really handy when you're not sure if a property is in an object or not. Alright, so next thing is destructuring inside of functions, which is really fun. So here's how you might a two-string function for an object. So here's my person object, same dude we have up here. And I'm passing an object, and it does 5-60-180. So here we're using the template. We're saying person.age, person.height, person.weight, right? So we're grabbing each property and displaying it here. But we could destructure it like we're doing here. Now notice we don't say const out in front when we're doing this. So this is the toString 2. Notice how we're getting the same value from our object, 5-60-180. And we can just destructure. So the first parameter here, right, is our object. And so we're destructuring the first one. And you can have more parameters like param2. And I don't know what, maybe we just stick param2 at the end here. Param2. Param2 is undefined currently. You can set a default value of 10. So now I have 10 at the end. And my second default value at the end here is going to be hello. So now we have 5-60-180 hello at the end. So I'm destructuring the first parameter, and then my second parameter I'm not destructuring. So this is important. This guy maps here, this guy maps here. So from object I'm getting 3 parameters: the age, the height, the weight, which is really cool. So instead of doing person.age, person.height, person.weight, I can destructure him inside the function. And same thing counts for and by the way, you can do the same kind of destructuring with the ... stuff we were doing above as well. Same thing with arrays. So here's grab first function. So this is grabbing just the first value in an array. So grab first, and then I'm returning a 1 because it's the first value here. And I could again do the spread operator, rest, and I could just return rest from that if I wanted to, and that grabs 2, 3 instead of first, and it's popping off the 1 because that's in our first parameter. Okay, next is destructuring with deeply nested. So you can just basically keep destructuring things and just go on. So again, we're going to be working with our object that we did above with age, height, weight. So this is me creating a nested object. So I have a property called 1, which is an object, and I spread object so it has an age, height, and weight. And then there's another property called 2, which also has the object. And now notice how I did object. I could have also just said object like that. Those two statements were equivalent. So let's actually simplify it to this so it's not confusing. Okay, so I have 1, and then inside of 1 I have 2, and they have all these. Basically it's an object inside of an object. So this is me unraveling the first layer. So nested object, here's I got 1 out of it. So 1 is equal to age, height, weight, all that junk. So now what happens if I want to get the age? I can say age, and here I'm going to rename this to what's a variable? I haven't used the variable Q, I don't think. So Q, what the heck is Q equal to? Q is equal to 5. So notice what we just did there. We got into 1, and then 1 was an object, so I destructured him, and then I got the age, and then I renamed him to Q. So that's why I got 5 here. Now I can destructure again. So I could say 2, and now I could get the age, oops, and I could reassign that to Q. So this is me destructuring twice. So you can basically destructure them as many times as you want, right? So that's really cool. And now this comes up less often because you don't usually have too many nested deep objects, but that does happen a decent amount of times, so it's good to know. The other thing is I could just be like, I could say 1 is equal to nested object, and then I could then destructure 1. So let's put that up here. I can then have const 2 is equal to 1. So I destructured 1. Now 1 is an object. I can destructure 2. So you can do it. You can destructure in steps like this too if you wanted to. And now this is me getting the height, which we'll say is t. We'll get it from that, and we get 60. So you can do it in steps as well. This is us doing it in like one blow. Now we got the age value instead of height, but same thing. Okay, and you can also do this with arrays. This is really handy. So let's say we have an array here. The first value is an object like this. So I have array, object is first value, age 5, 60, 80, 180, right? I can grab the first value in the array, and I can destructure it. So this is me getting the height of the first object. So pretty cool. I can say 5, 6. I can just say rest of array, right? So I combined it. So I destructured here, and I used the spread operator to get the rest of the array there. So you can get some really wonky looking complex statements where you're destructuring, spreading things, and it does get some taking used to, but once you get used to it, it's actually really fun and really nice. Don't let the nested destructuring scare you. You don't have to do this, right? The equivalent statement is doing like object array 0. And by the way, you could destructure it like this, right? Height h2. So this is us getting these two are, this is equivalent getting the h. This is h2. So this is me getting the first value, then grabbing that. So there's multiple ways you can do this. It's pretty much up to preference. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope that was helpful and you got some tips on some of this new syntax. It does get some taking used to, but hopefully you'll enjoy it like I do once you get it down. Now I'm going to be putting up this code on GitHub if you want to check it out, run through this example yourself, and stay tuned for tomorrow. I'm going to be going over some async, await, and how you do asynchronous code. That's it. Thank you guys for watching.